clients are having conversations for months and months and months and months with everybody in their audience. And here's what happens. All of a sudden, the conversations they were having a month ago, the conversations they were having 2 months ago are compounding today. And they're literally stacking sales conversations and sales on top of each other consistently and repeatedly. And it's all of a sudden, it's this overflow of sales happening, and they haven't changed a single thing. They literally are doing the exact same thing that they were doing just a couple of weeks and months ago. What I want to do is share with you guys 7 mind-blowing conversations that we had this past week inside of my mastermind program with my clients who are scaling their businesses, they're scaling their sales, they're streamlining, they're hiring team, they're doing all these amazing things. And I want to share behind the scenes of some of those conversations that I thought, we talked about a lot of things, but I picked 7 of the things that I think are mind-blowing and are going to be extremely helpful and insightful for those of you here who are, taking your coaching or consultant business to 6, multiple 6, 7, multiple 7 figures and beyond. I think that you're going to get a lot of insight and value from the things that we talked about inside of that mastermind. All right, number one of the first things that we talked about inside this mastermind was stacking sales. This is really, really powerful because when we think about sales, when we think about selling, typically we think about we're going to go close a sale and we're going to sign a new client and then we're going to go close another sale and then we'll sign a client and you know what I mean? And we look at it like this one-off kind of thing. And one of the cool things that my client had said on the mastermind call this week, one of the cool things she said is like, Ann, I am realizing that because I'm having such powerful, steady, intimate conversations with quality leads in my audience on a consistent, regular basis, I'm looking at my trajectory of my business and I'm looking at the numbers and I'm looking at the quality of the conversations. And technically, I could literally not launch this month or next month. And I literally would reach my sales goals just from these conversations that have stacked over the past couple of months. And this is like mind-blowing, right? Because when you think about that, I often tell my clients what you did last month will start to pay off in 2 months from now. What you do this month will start to pay off in 2 or 3 months from now. A lot of times we really have this idea that we do an activity right now and it pays off right now. But the truth of the matter, and then what happens is we're not consistent, right? Because you do it for a week and then you're like, that didn't work, so I'm going to go ahead and try something else. And then you do that for a couple weeks and you're like, yeah, that didn't really seem to work, so I'm going to try something else. And what my clients are doing in the mastermind is we are streamlining. We are simplifying and streamlining consistency across the board. My clients are having conversations for months and months and months and months with everybody in their audience. And here's what happens. All of a sudden, the conversations they were having a month ago, the conversations they were having 2 months ago are compounding today. And they're literally stacking sales conversations and sales on top of each other consistently and repeatedly. And it's all of a sudden, it's this overflow of sales happening and they haven't changed a single thing. They literally are doing the exact same thing that they were doing just a couple of weeks and months ago. And so my mastermind client said to me, oh my God, Ann, I'm literally looking at the conversations and the quality of the conversations that I am having right now with the people in my audience. And if I don't do a launch or do anything for the rest of this month or next month, I literally am going to reach my sales goals just from these conversations that have stacked upon each other over these last few weeks and months. That is really groundbreaking when you think of that. I want you guys to think about steady conversations and steady activity. Like, what are we doing in a very consistent, steady manner that is going to create a compound effect later? So, and this is really, really cool because as you do this, and then you do like a launch, that becomes cherries on top. And so here's what I teach my clients that I want you guys to walk away with from this one thing when we think about stacking sales. I always teach my clients there's 3 three phases that every single business in this whole world is going to go through no matter what. And the first is traction, and then there's momentum, and then there's overflow. And you will go through all three of these. Traction is where you're doing the activity consistently. For this particular mastermind client, she's having consistent, steady conversations with the quality leads that are in her audience. That's traction. Well, then the next phase, when that compounds because you did it consistently, what happens is we move into momentum. Momentum is where you're like, I got this, and I'm doing it, and I got it, and now I'm actually seeing results begin to happen. I'm actually starting to have good conversations. I'm actually starting to have sales conversations. Now I'm starting to generate sales. Oh, I see that by doing this consistently, I'm ABC equals XYZ. I'm actually starting to get these results. That's momentum. Momentum is where your activity that you did consistently begins to pay off. This can look like anything, right? Like this can be you or your seller or whoever having sales conversations. You're doing the same thing. You're having these conversations. You're doing it consistently, day after day, week after week, month after month, consistently. And that all of a sudden, those conversations you were having are now becoming sales conversations. Those sales conversations are now becoming new paying clients. And all of a sudden you see momentum begin to happen, where what you're doing is paying off. And then the third phase is overflow. This is where you get to a point, and I know there's some of you in here that totally relate to this, but this is where you get to the point, right, in overflow, where there's so much you can't handle it all. There's so many conversations coming in that you can't keep up. There's so many people interested in your programs, you can't sign them all. There's all the results coming from your consistency that you can't keep up, right? This is usually where you hire a team. This is usually where you automate some stuff. This is where you start streamlining, because it's like, oh, yes, Carrie, good problem to have, right? This is where the overflow begins. But here's the thing. You're not going to have overflow until you have traction. Traction, for some of you, you'll relate to this. Traction is where you feel like you're doing the things, but like they're not producing the result, right? Maybe you're going live every week and you're like, I feel like I'm just talking to myself. Maybe you're sending emails every week and you're like, no one's replying. Maybe you're putting out invitations and nobody's buying. But if you can get through traction, where you feel like you're talking to yourself and nobody's listening, if you could get through traction and let it compound, you will leap into momentum. And momentum is where ABC equals XYZ. What you're doing begins to pay off. It starts to work. It starts to produce the result, right? And then from there, if you just continue, you'll have overflow. Overflow is a beautiful place to be. It's a great problem to have. Too much to handle. It's a beautiful place to be. And it's also the place where you streamline, you automate, and you hire support. You're not going to typically get there without having some traction, and we need momentum. That's how we get there. So that is stacking. You want to stack sales, stack results, stack conversations, stack applications, stack people interested in your programs, right? So traction, momentum, and overflow in order to stack your sales. That was one of the first groundbreaking conversations that we had in the program that was really huge for my mastermind clients.